Thank you so much. My name is Nora No Mitchell, and I'm a high school student in Sarasota, Florida, and I've been a lifelong advocate for girls' rights, and I'm the founder and leader of my social justice group, Sarasota Students for Justice. I have the pleasure of being here today with Ms. Meg DeLoatch, an award-winning writer, producer, and showrunner whose works have broken boundaries and provided greater representation for people of color on screen. Ms. DeLoatch, thank you so much for being here to speak with me today.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to meet you, Nora.
Likewise. So I'm really excited. So let's jump right in. My first question to you, as this is a panel about representation and storytelling, is about representation on screen. How do your own experiences shape the way you write or portray your characters? And what does seeing those elements of yourself on screen mean to you?
Well, starting with the first part of the question, as a writer, I can't help but imbue aspects of my life, my journey, my story into any characters that I'm working with. It's only natural that you're going to write about what you know. Representation for me is incredibly important. I feel like as people of color, we haven't always been seen in this country. And that's certainly true of the visual medium, that on television and in the movies, if you see us, there was a time when you would see us in very stereotypical or menial roles. And it's so important for young people of color to see themselves on television doing all kinds of aspirational things, because art and life usually imitates art. And so if a young girl is watching a television show and sees a young girl who looks like her, who's talking about being an astronaut or about being an empowered young woman in a dating situation, what have you, that's something that I think that I can communicate and educate without preaching, and empower a young person to think that they can be like that character.
Absolutely. Representation is so powerful, especially for people of color and especially for young people. So my next question to you, and you mentioned this a little bit in your previous answer, was about how it's natural for you to imbue parts of your own story and your own life into your work. So my next question is, what has the process been like to create and share your own work and to put your experiences and your perspective into that work?
Well, a good example of my most personal show to date is Family Reunion on Netflix. And I was given the opportunity to tell the story of an African-American family, much like my own. And while everything you see on the screen is not necessarily ripped right from my life, it's ripped from the lives of a collective group of African-American writers. And what we've done is we sort of have woven together all of the things that make us similar and then different to sort of give an honest depiction of an African-American family. I don't know if I could not do that though. You know, it's my story. I'm gonna always tell it from my point of view, which is to show that we are a happy, loving community, that we support each other, that we tease each other really hard. But that's the community I know. And so all I can do is share my experience being a young African American woman growing up in this country.
Absolutely. And I have to agree that representation is so powerful, and what we share on screen and how we can make it honest, that has a lot of power for the audience. And kind of going from that about and the power of representation. My next question is about how representation can be translated into empathy generating stories, and how, like you mentioned, your work, it's creating an honest depiction, and it's showing people, possibly even people who aren't familiar with these communities, more about them. So my next question is, in what ways do you think storytelling can foster understanding and create lasting change?
Well, it's ironic you bring this up because I have a 7-year-old son, so I have au pairs that I've welcomed into my home over the last 6 years. And one of them, Edna, is from Colombia, has a niece who lives in Spain, who's about 7 years old. And she was talking to her yesterday, and her niece wasn't paying attention. Come to find out, her niece was watching Family Reunion, and she's watching it for the second time because she loves the show so much. And I was so moved by that because it told me that there's a little girl, and maybe a lot of young people in Spain, who don't know anything about what it's like to be African American, except from television or movies. And so a lot of those movies, maybe they're not so positive, maybe they're showing gangsters or what have you, but now there's a community there that sees that we are human, that we are relatable, that we are lovable and loving. And I think that without having to try to sit down and do a cultural exchange, we're sharing the real of who we are. I also, you mentioned your background and working with social justice. We did a social justice episode where we talked about how sometimes young Black men are profiled by the police. And we purposefully did it at the end of our first part. And I wanted to do it that way because I wanted the audience to fall in love with these little boys, to get to know them, to know that they are loving and honest and kind, and that those are the kinds of boys who police are mistaking for criminals and treating like criminals. And we got a really strong reaction. And I think because a lot of people, it was personal. Whether or not they were Black, they loved those boys and they didn't like seeing them treated that way. And I think that that's what's really powerful about being able to sort of tell your story, and why I love Girl Up so much, because it's important for everyone to have the opportunity and the platform to tell their story, to humanize all of us.
That's absolutely incredible. What you do in the entertainment industry certainly does have this amazing role, and entertainment does place, and the media plays such a big role in how we see each other. And we kind of touched on this a little bit in your answer, but just kind of leaning deeper into the social justice portion. What role do you think storytelling, especially in the entertainment industry, plays as a tool in advancing social justice issues?
I think, again, it's such a subtle tool in so many ways, because you're entertaining people and yet you can be enlightening and educating them at the same time. And I think that it can be really important, just as important as marching and standing up and insisting on equality. I think when you create characters that people relate to, and then you put them in various situations that highlight the injustices, I think that your audience automatically learns to identify with those characters and go, that's wrong. And I don't want to see anyone paying my character less money than she deserves. I don't want to see anyone marginalizing my character and saying that their history shouldn't be taught, and so on. So I really think, I like to think of myself as being an advocate, but undercover, because I think that, sometimes if people see you coming, they block you mentally. They don't want to receive your message. But if you're just saying, hey, turn me on at 8 o'clock in your, on a Monday night in your living room, and get to know my characters who are a representation of me, you never know how quickly somebody's heart is going to be opened.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. Speaking as a young Black and Asian person living in America, for so long I didn't get to see things like that on screen. They didn't talk about these sorts of issues. So I think it's wonderful that, at least for people younger than me, and for me even now as maybe slightly older but still a young person, I can get to see these things on screen. So because we're running low on time, did you have any last minute thoughts or things that you wanted to say?
Just that I want to encourage anyone listening who has a need to share their story, to please share it. That our world in so many ways has become smaller with these streaming platforms and having a global audience. And I promise you, there is someone out there who will relate and who will be inspired by it, and that it's such an intimate thing to do. But I think in a small way, we're all contributing toward the fabric of humanity and reminding each other that we are more alike than we are different. So please share your stories.
I think that's a perfectly inspiring note to leave on. Miss DeLoatch, thank you so much for being here to speak with me today.
Happy to be here, Nora.